Excuse me, do you mind if I join you? Are you sure you don't mind? You're absolutely sure I'm disturbing you?
What's your favorite holiday?
The 3rd of July,
Why the 3rd? Why the 3rd?
on account of its 4th of July Eve. Tomorrow's the 4th.
Wham! Boom! Bam! Zoom! Pow!
Hello and welcome to the Mental Suppository. I'm Brett Herholtz, and welcoming back,
Your old friend Murphy.
welcome back, Murphy. And
Murphy Grumbar, how are you doing?
oh, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm okay.
And we've got a great discussion planned for tonight, and it's something we both grew up with and kind of really enjoyed as kids. And I think we've got a lot of great stuff to talk about tonight.
I agree.
Right after a word from our sponsor, and since it's summer right now, it's something I think our listeners might want to take advantage of.
The Mental Suppository is sponsored by cheapassmotels.com. For the cheap bastard on the go, cheapassmotels.com now offers the option of staying at an Airbnb for next to nothing a night.
The room I stayed in ended up being a tool shed with a sleeping bag. I shared the room with two drifters who stole my laundry money and gin. Come to find out I didn't bring any gin. But I only paid $1.80 for a 4-night stay, so I can't complain.
cheapassmotels.com. Find us on Craigslist and OnlyFans.
So when I was a kid, I remember it's like when I was very young, one of the things I wanted to be for the longest time was a comic strip artist. And I've mentioned this in past episodes. And we grew up in a time when, newspaper strips were still being read and still being enjoyed. And even into our late teens, there were still some great strips like Bloom County and Calvin and Hobbes that were.
And they still had cultural relevance.
That's the thing. I think they were kind of the last really big strips to have any sort of a cultural relevance or impact, especially, Calvin sort of taking notes from stuff like Pogo and the Peanuts and sort of having the, much like early Peanut strips where the kids were very, very philosophical and very adult-like. Calvin took on a lot of those attributes, not really talking down to like a younger audience. And I think that's probably why, when we were, younger, we enjoyed those strips because they didn't talk down to us the way other strips would. I wanted to be a comic strip artist. This was around a time when, newspaper strips were no longer the way they were. And it was one of those things, I think it was probably since the 1970s, they were just, working in comic strips, the jobs were becoming less and less as, they were starting to, shrink down the comic.
Everything's shrinking. And then everything's shrinking. The subscription base, the size that you get to work with, and the talent base.
And that was one of the reasons Burke Breathitt stopped doing Bloom County, is because he just couldn't work in the size they were making him work in. And I mean, Bill Watterson, demanded and he rightfully so. I mean, his strip was the best strip in the paper at the time. I mean, and he he wanted a full page for his the Sunday comics, and he deserved it. And apparently, it really pissed off Bill Keenan. Screw him. And Calvin and Hobbes is a much better strip than Family Circus ever was.
Yeah. I think what's happened is like, if you go back in time, there are just these giant periods where they were very different. They were much bigger. Well,
that was the thing. There was a time when that was the big job.
Yeah.
That was what you wanted to, it's like you worked in comic books, but but you did that. So you would end up getting your own, the dream was to get your own syndicated newspaper strip. And I mean, this was from like maybe the early part of the 20th century till like maybe the late 1960s, early 1970s, reading the comic page was an event. And I mean, it had some of the greatest comics ever. And I mean, I talked about in the past, a lot of the ones I loved as a kid, like the Peanuts and for a time Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah, early Garfield. You ever look at that?
Oh,
very different.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was like that was around the time Jim Davis, probably worked on the strip and gave a shit. Yeah. But honestly, I mean, but I also grew up with this knowledge of some of the older comic strips because my dad loved comics like Pogo, like Terry and the Pirates, like Krazy Kat, Prince Valiant. Those were the ones. The Phantom. Those were the ones he remembered as a kid, and he would kind of pass those down to me. So Walt Kelly's Pogo especially was one of his favorites, and it was one I really grew to love because I feel like we'll probably end up talking about him a lot on this episode, but
your knowledge of Walt will be much deep. I just started really,
but I mean it's all it's always great. There's never a bad time to start. I mean it's one of those.
I agree. I mean especially because I mean personally. Discovering, reading and discovering these old comics, you also just get the sensibility of the times.
Oh, absolutely.
It's kind of like if you're into history, it's really interesting to see what people are talking about and what you can make jokes about that you would never be able to today.
He's kind of a forgotten master around this time. I mean, in his artwork he's just probably had some of the most absolutely beautiful artwork.
He is kind of a forgotten master, and it is weird that.
And I don't know how many of our listeners really remember Walt Kelly's Pogo the way you might remember Charles Schultz's Peanuts.
Well, what they should do is the library will probably have some of his books, so check them out.
Absolutely,
yeah. Or you can get interlibrary loan and check out his work. I'm just starting now, and what's nice is. It looks like, so the way he's built these collection, the first one I started, is it's kind of cool. It's his strips, he had like storylines that went maybe like the week.
Oh, yeah.
Or 2 weeks. It looks like a week.
Yeah.
But he added like a little art at the top to start a new chapter. It wasn't in the original newspaper.
Right.
But he added just a beginning image.
I think the layout. Title. I think the layout for the collections was sort of a holdover from, or at least it was something he kind of got from his time working comic books. So he was able to lay it out so he could take his newspaper strips and sort of make it, work as a comic book type story.
Yeah, because it was public. Like the one I got is like 1950. Like the graphic novel wasn't even really invented yet. So
I feel like the graphic novel didn't really start till like the 70s or 80s with Will Eisner, but
I think it was like early 70s.
Yeah, and so I think it was one of those, and it's definitely one of those things. Pogo started out in the comic books, and he sort of ended up slowly working his way, into the late 40s, early 50s, into newspaper strips. And
he started as a comic book.
Oh yeah, actually no, he started as a Disney artist.
I said that the strip started as a comic book.
The character Pogo started as a comic book, and it sort of he kind of created a kind of his own little history of Pogo later on. But the actual history was, Pogo and Albert the alligator in particular, and also they had a human child in the strip who was a young African American boy who was like friends with Pogo and all them.
Wait a minute. He had a human friend in the strip or the comic?
In the comic book.
Okay.
And that was sort of the human elements. I mean, when they started doing the newspaper strips were ended up being sort of phased out. He never really. He only after he started doing the newspaper strips, he didn't have any human characters in it. And most of like any sort of like real world people he would have as animals, but. That's the thing with I think the choices he made for doing Pogo in this set in the Okefenokee swamp in the South was actually very clever because I mean a lot of the stuff he talks, a lot of his political views in the strips are more center or in left leaning, which is not really which I don't think many people in the South are very left leaning. So you have this very charming sort of Southern sounding strip. But he's saying he's saying a lot of these very liberal ideas and taking shots at a lot of very powerful people at the time. And I mean, people like he would caricature people like Senator Joseph McCarthy, J. Edgar Hoover, Nixon.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
So I mean, there was he did a lot of caricaturing and took a lot of shots. And he actually ended up on a lot of FBI lists because they were trying to peg him as a communist.
Okay.
And they were actually trying to see if they could decode the words in his strip, thinking there was some sort of a communist message in them. I mean,
so I think to the language of the strip, I think the reason why it's more of a niche thing is that it's a little complicated with its depiction of accents and slang.
It's complicated. And it's very much a product of its time. I mean, it's very much set in the 1950s and the 1960s. But it's like, you know, you look at it, and he was an artist that, you know, his artwork just got better and better over time. I mean, he's
really juicy. He's really good.
I mean, you know, as
he can draw.
As it progressed from his brush work
and his ink, his ink work is just phenomenal.
And I think he did that all. I think he did all the lettering. He did all the penciling and all the ink.
It makes sense. Yeah, he's a great artist.
Very few, you know, I don't know how many artists, comic artists over time did that. A lot of them, like, you know, Jim Davis had their little sweatshop of artists that would do the work.
That was much later, though, with Davis. You know, the beginning, I think he was doing a lot of it.
I think
it was a lot weirder.
Oh, yeah.
A lot weirder, yeah.
But with, with Walt Kelly, I think right up to when he was too sick to do the strip, he was still, I think, in bed, in his hospital bed, doing strips for Pogo.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was just one of those things. I think from like 1960 to 1970, that was like his artwork just kind of took off, and you saw some of his best work ever. Was
really, because I'm really enjoying 1950s. So
his and that's the thing about his artwork. His 1950s artwork is great too, but I have kind of a soft spot for his later 1960s work, and you can definitely tell he was a
you have it all. You have the entire collection.
Not the entire collection. I have a friend who actually had a lot of Pogo books, and he gifted them to me. But a lot of the books, I did when I was a lot younger, I did what you're doing now, and I would rent books. I would rent them from the library, and I would actually try to draw the characters. And so Pogo just became one of my absolute all-time favorites. Yeah, it was one of those things. As I got older, I could see why my dad liked the strip, and I became more and more. I always liked the character, but the art. You know, the art style was so far beyond what, you know, a lot of newspaper strips did. But there were a lot of great newspaper. There was a lot of great artwork at that time.
Just if you look at, I still get a newspaper subscription, and I still read the dailies.
Oh, you do?
I still read the comics, and you know, I get a daily paper.
Yeah.
In Philadelphia, I'm letting everyone know where I live.
This is I mean, we grew up in that era. You know, we still got the you know.
Yeah, I do now. So what I do is I get a digital paper during the week, and I get a physical paper on the weekend.
Okay.
So I do get the Sundays, and I mean, some of them are. I mean, there's still some great comics going on.
Oh yeah,
but it's pretty far and few between.
That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, Mutz is fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's brilliantly written, brilliantly drawn for what the space that he has.
Exactly.
And it really is. It's the space, and you can't have any kind of sophisticated art anymore.
That was the other thing about Pogo and a lot of the older artwork.
Pogo would never work today.
Oh, no. And I think what was one of the things they also did in the older strips, not just Pogo, but many of the strips, is you would have like an ongoing story that would go maybe from week to week, or maybe even for a month. I mean, they would have these, these amazing like little, stories that would, like, maybe Pogo ending up in prehistoric times, or ending up,
Yeah. He did that?
There was once, I think they ended up in some sort of a prehistoric times. In again, it was like it was like 1964. Right at the the height of trying to get we're in the process of getting a man on the moon.
Okay.
But also they I mentioned earlier his doing political being very political.
Yeah.
I mean I think he was the first artist, or maybe at the time might have been the only artist in newspaper strips who took on Senator Joseph McCarthy, who was everyone today, unfortunately, and I love strips but back in the day they were something that was watched by people, and it made headline. It made I got a great Peanut story. Okay. Oh yeah, go on.
It has a connection to Philadelphia. All right. So Schultz had in the comic, he makes all these references to this woman in Philadelphia in a roundabout way. Okay. This reference to this woman. this girl that Charlie Brown's is friends with, or Snoopy loves, or something like this. And what it was is this references this woman in Philadelphia that Charles Schultz was having an affair with.
Really?
He was talking about it in the comic strip.
Well, I also heard that he based Lucy on his first wife.
Yeah, but anyway, this is more salacious. So,
oh yeah,
what happened?
I never heard this.
Yeah, so this woman had an art show based on all these strips in Philadelphia. Like, I don't know, after he was dead.
Yeah.
When did he die?
I think it was like 99, 2000. It had to have been about 2000, I think.
Maybe this is like actually in the 80s or 90s. She had a show, showing all the strips talking about her.
Yeah.
It was just interesting. Yeah, so he had an affair. And in he had a strip, they'd be like, like Charlie Brown was like, Snoopy like slammed the phone down and like, yeah, I can't like be involved with her anymore. It depicts the whole affair. Apparently she was like a super fan, was writing him letters, and then it turned into a real affair, like a physical.
Oh my
affair.
Goodness.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't imagine someone falling in love with a cartoonist today and writing them letters. Like, I mean, and then no kid even reads it. I mean, that wasn't a kid. I think it was a young woman. She was like, 22 or in her 20s. But still, he was like, 45 or 50.
Yeah, he was probably, because I think he was in his 70s when he finally passed. But
now this is when he was like in his 50s or something.
Oh, okay. Well, I know, I guess, I think he went through I think maybe the late 60s, early 70s, he went through a very painful divorce. And a lot of like the ones of Snoopy going to the moon, I think was his way of sort of detaching, the more.
I mean, I don't like that he's the idea of him lying to his wife, but imagine the cachet. I can't imagine that kind of cachet happening today. Like, I'm going to go sleep with this cartoonist. And, he's so sexy. He has a strip in the paper.
Well, like we
kids
said,
don't even read the comic strips anymore.
Well, like we said at the time, if you want, you wanted to be a comic strip artist when you were a kid. I mean, that was, and as a professional at that time, it's like having your own newspaper strip. I think in our it's like in our time would have been like having your own comic book series, which is funny how the whole thing kind of flip-flopped itself. Because, it's like before that, you got into you did comic books to get your own newspaper strip, and then it sort of changed over time, where it's like you wanted to become a comic book fan,
the big difference. The big difference. I love comic books. Graphic novels are awesome.
Oh yeah.
But the reason I think that comic strips are superior is that you can fold. You have a newspaper sent to the general public. You don't have to go to a comic store to find this. It's like folded up in the bathroom. It's disposable. It can be everywhere. Back in the day, it's grandpa can read it, and then or like the 8-year-old can read it.
Oh, I just can still remember that, going over my grandparents on Sunday, and they'd have the big Worcester Telegram and Worcester Telegram.
Red, is that you, Red? We saved a newspaper for you in your bedroom in case you go to the bathroom.
Kind of like that.
We're gonna put this in your cage, Brett.
Yes, because my grandparents kept me in a cage. That's right. But no, I remember we'd go over Sunday morning and or Sunday afternoon, and I'd immediately go for the comic section, and I'd be the one. I'd open it up, and I'd be trying to draw the characters. I'd be the one trying to draw Dennis the Menace or Charlie Brown.
You have that connection with your grandparents. You don't have that connection with like the comic shop and your grandparents.
No, you don't. And
I think
with my grandfather, he also worked for the newspaper. He was he worked in the engravings department in the printers building. So, I mean, so that was that. That was kind of the job he got after one of the jobs he got after the war, and I think he did it from like maybe late 40s, early 1950s till like the 1980s. And so there was that newspaper connection. And I mean, he was just, it was something I remember him do, by the time I could remember it better, I think he had retired, he had gone into early retirement and stuff like that. But yeah, he did. He worked in the engravers department for years.
Cool. That's cool. Yeah. I mean, I just think that kind of intimacy and it's not anymore. No, it's like what I am saddened by that lack of access and that immediacy and that cultural relevancy is gone. Because I think cartoons, drawing and stories like that are like a beautiful thing to have every day.
Yeah.
Whereas like a comic book is like, you get that, it's once a month.
Yep.
You don't have that relationship. It's kind of like, actually it's kind of like old classic Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Where you get these parts every week. It feels like
you talk about the newspaper strip being like old Doctor Who.
Yes, because like your kid, the story keeps going, and sometimes and there's all these parts, and like you feel like you're part of something. You don't get that.
I think that's the other thing that would later on lack with comics that would come post 1970s and 1980s to the 1990s is it sort of fell into this feeling of repetition, and it became like the
same joke over
a gag a day, where there wasn't really a story. It was just sort of like set up the joke, the middle part, and the punchline, and sort of like knock.
You're right.
Like knock knock, who's there?
That's the real miss, is this end of the storyline.
Whereas if you read like we said with like the original Pogo comic strips,
or
with the original Popeye strips, Thimble Theatre, there was an ongoing comic, there was an ongoing story, and you didn't always have a punchline at the end of the strip.
Yeah.
Like the first case in point, the first strip Popeye appears in, the funniest line is actually the middle panel when they ask, "Are you a sailor?" He goes, do I look like a cow? You think I'm a cowboy?
Yeah.
And the last panel is actually not really a funny joke in it. It's sort of like, the story, it's sort of like this is part of the story, which is going to continue the next day.
I just think like, also it's like, I think across the board as a purveyor of entertainment, I'm very interested in the early days of things.
Oh yeah.
And like anything where it starts out and there's not a lot of rules and there's not like this established, this is how you have to do it because this one guy hit big.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's trying stuff. And, and also it's like there's so much competition among comics. Newspapers are trying to steal away comic artists to only appear in their newspaper.
Right.
In the public, maybe they publish 10 newspapers or whatever. They want to hire an art cartoonist and his stuff only appears in our newspapers.
Right.
So it's like, being in the newspapers is big, is, a really big deal, a big deal.
Absolutely. And I mean,
and
you have
big money if you got big.
Actually, you hit the point right on the head. I mean, another strip that kind of didn't follow any of the rules was George Herman's Krazy Kat, another strip my dad got me into. And
now I think that's like, and that had like that has a special place. I compare him to a modern cartoonist who would be Ben Ketcher.
Oh, really?
Because they are people who get blessed by having patrons.
Yeah.
Okay. Krazy Kat would have gone away after 4 or 5 years. He hit like during the early 20s and stuff like that, in the boom time and like the jazz era. He was very popular.
Yeah,
that sensibility.
It has that very jazz era.
Yeah, it has a jazz and it has a 20s feel to it.
Yeah,
and with the humor, the way it's drawn, everything feels that time period. And I think also what made it hard for the general public to always love it is that took language to a whole nother level.
Oh yeah, he just didn't give a rat's ass about language.
Yeah.
He did whatever he wanted to.
Yeah. So it's hard to sometimes decipher everything that's going on.
It's like, and I think I mentioned this to you.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this to you before. It's like some of the language almost sounds like little Yiddish puns
or even like in his own language he made up. I think some of it's just like I don't even know where it came from.
Just the whole, and even the whole love triangle of the cat loves Krazy Kat loves Ignatz Mouse, who doesn't love Krazy Kat back, who Officer Pup loves Krazy Kat. So and he and Ignatz Mouse is always throwing a brick at her, and she considers it a term of endearment, calling him
but that's the genius. I think that's the genius of the strip. That's what makes it viable, is that if it was just a love triangle, if it was just like and crazy, very loose drawing in an interesting setting, but it has this insane love triangle, but it also has like unbelievable amounts of violence, along with all this sophistication, and no one knows whose sex they are. The mouse, the unknown. So it's like all these unknowns, and then it's very, very kind of hard to read sometimes, but it has explosions of violence.
Yeah.
So I think it's like it kind of keeps you. It keeps you going. You just kind of want to figure it out.
It's very ambiguous, and I think it's like one of the draws of the strip. And the artwork is just really, it's like this really great smudgy looking artwork that just has this really.
I wouldn't say
the ink has like this really satisfying feel to it.
I will say, of all the people we talked about, besides Walt Kelly, I don't know if there's a better draftsman than that.
Oh,
maybe Watterson and Calvin and Hobbes.
Possibly, I think in the modern sense, he comes very close.
But I think Walt Kelly's better.
Oh yeah,
from what I've seen as a draftsman, I think Calvin and Hobbes is more interesting, probably overall.
It's a lot more. It's very imaginative and very.
Yeah, I think that hit the zeitgeist, the perfect comic strip.
Absolutely, and he was somebody who just he also didn't give into commercialism and marketing. He was the one who's like, no, I don't want T-shirts of my characters. I don't want toys of my characters. I want to do things my way. This is, I don't want to have this become like a, cops sticking to the inside of people's car windows, which I mean, that was the whole joke behind Bill the Cat. He was an outright parody of Garfield, where, you take this and making this character just look absolutely morbidly disgusting. And in the same, but the character still ended up getting a fan base. Isn't that the greatest irony? I know Burke Breathitt even talked about even the character of Steve Dallas, who is this yuppie uber Republican bro dude lawyer. He didn't mean him to be any sort of a role model, but when the strip started out in college, there were all these frat guys who immediately thought the character was fabulous, and that was not what Breathitt set out to be. He was making fun of that sort of a shallow human being.
And I think also, if you look at a lot of these, we talked about Popeye, we talked a little about Krazy Kat. They were all Popeyes. The early Popeyes are fantastic, and they're very loose.
And what's sad about that whole strip is Segar died early. He ended up. I forget what happened, but he ended up. Something happened that took him early, and so it's like we were kind of robbed of this. Some of the greatest strips. I mean, Popeye didn't start out eating spinach. Apparently, he got his strength by petting the head of a wiffle hen. And it's like, what the hell's a wiffle hen?
Yeah, I don't even know what that is.
I mean, he's just created this entirely one. And I mean, Bluto or Brutus or whoever the hell you wanted to call him wasn't his original enemy, but it was one of those things. Popeye was definitely more ambiguous at that time, where he was a good-hearted person, but he would just he
was a lunkhead. He was like this musclehead sailor who just like he's just not very smart, but he just loves to fight.
Yes.
And he loves to he's cantankerous.
Yes.
He's like he just doesn't what he has? He doesn't want to be disrespected as a sailor.
Yeah.
And he thinks that landlubbers are just kind of lost.
Yeah.
They don't get him. They don't know how free he is. They don't know how violent he can be if you can get him angry. And it seems that people don't understand how dangerous he is.
And that was a character that's look changed over a very short period of time. I mean, seeing from what the first strip was to the way Segar would continue to draw him, he just, he definitely developed the look of, what would, eventually become his sort of staple look.
Yeah. I have to say, I've just started on Popeye. Oh, so I can't wait to read more. But it's also, all these characters, especially today, a strip gets pitched and it is what it is.
Yeah.
If hardly any new ones happen. And, in Philadelphia, I have let's see, we have Mutts.
Oh, I've read Mutts.
Yeah, we have a strip called Wapu, which is kind of cool.
Never heard of that one. No.
There's a strip called Sherman's Lagoon, which is actually kind of goofy and fun sea creatures. But it's all these strips except for
I think I've heard of that one. It's
Zitz. I like.
Yeah,
Zitz is kind of cool. But but like these old strips like Krazy Kat, those two, the mouse and the cat, were part of a different Herriman strip that the publisher Hearst was like, I like those two, make them their own comic.
Well, that was kind of,
Yeah.
and Popeye
And he kept them in business. You know, they tried all the newspapers that he owned were like, you know, no one gets this anymore. It's too weird. We want to pull it. And Hearst to show his power had sent over to Herriman a lifetime contract.
Wow.
He signed a lifetime contract with Hearst.
And this was a guy that was known for being an utter bastard too.
I know, but he loved Krazy Kat. And he was like, I mean, it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
it's
say. Absolutely cool, but I mean,
it's awesome.
It's odd too.
It's just so weird. It's like, you know, but that's what an awesome, well-theored, awesome publisher should do. I'm going to keep publishing it because I know, because we're talking about Krazy Kat today.
Yeah,
because he knew that how many other strips that were published that day that we have no idea anything about.
Well,
nobody cares.
I've mentioned in past podcast that another strip that came out because of Hearst was Flash Gordon, because Hearst wanted to buy the rights to Buck Rogers, and John Dilley, who was who had created the Buck Rogers strip, had met with Hearst, and I think they had talked it out, and Dilley just, you know, after the whole talk, Dilley just says, well, I appreciate you coming and talking with me before you stole my idea. And so, sure enough, shortly thereafter, Hearst hires Alex Raymond to draw the Flash Gordon strips.
Really, he stole that whole idea.
Well, yeah, it's you know, if you look at Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, they're very similar.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, it's like definitely that 1920s, 1930s idea of what the future might be like.
Yeah, and like space adventures or whatever.
Exactly. So,
yeah. I mean, it got to be pretty exciting in the 20s, you know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
they still thought there was possibility of life on the moon.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, life on Uranus.
What else should we talk about?
I mean, just, you know, it's like that. Like I said, it was just such a different time, and you know, they were just given such a bigger palette to work with. And,
just the craftsmanship.
Absolutely.
And let's talk about. I don't want to pick on my cartoonists today, but one in particular I hate.
Go for it.
It's a diary of a wimpy kid.
Oh, that book series? It's a comic strip now?
No. I guess there's drawings in there. I guess I'm making a leap here, but what I'm saying is, like,
no, I understand.
It's like, this is, and nothing against it. He has like 50,000 books of diaries of this wimpy kid doing stuff, and that's fine. But the craftsmanship, it just looks absolute garbage, and the guy doesn't know how to draw. Well, and it's all right. He's making stick figures, and maybe that's the point, right? I don't get it.
Well, there's another book out there that I don't mind called Piggy and Elephant, and I mean, it's very more juvenile looking, but the stories and the characters have character to them. So it's sort of like the old BC comics, where when Johnny Hart wasn't being like uber religious, some of the original BC comics could actually be very funny and very clever. You know, when, you know, it's like when he wasn't like sort of pontificating religion.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I just think that across the board, though, there's a style of, I'm going to make mine look like it's drawn by a child because I cannot draw beyond what an 8-year-old can draw. There's no craftsmanship anymore. There's no one, you know, like we're having the generations who for a while drew, and then when they were younger, but now everyone's playing like video games. They don't know how to draw no more. So they don't know how to do any kind of craftsmanship of any. No, like, it's just that, like, I just feel like the modern entertainment and industrial complex, these like video games and YouTube and all this stuff, it's just, I don't want to, I'm not coming down on all of it, but it's made to addict all these kids, and they don't have time for any other activities to create their own things. Right. And I think it's like killing, like, that's why I don't think a lot of kids are not going to know how to draw. They don't put the time in. They don't have the patience.
because they feel like they can just make a funny meme and get like 1 million views.
And I'm fine with that too. It's just like it would be nice, like I don't know. We're like,
on the same side, on the different side of that coin, there's a comic, a web comic called Cyanide and Happiness that's drawn very very simply, but it's actually very funny because it's like it kind of delves into some very dark humor and like sort of turns jokes around.
That's fine. I don't mind. Like, I'm not saying there's not room for all kinds of styles and all kinds of representation, all kinds of artists.
But there's less of a laziness in the ideas where I can see where you're saying.
I'm just saying the default now, all of it is like stick figures and
a quick
barely
fix.
Yeah. All of it's like, I would like some diversity in styles and crafts. There's no craftsmanship anymore. It's all like
I think with the artists we were talking about with like Alex Raymond, Walt Kelly, Segar, George Herman, Charles Schultz, Johnny Hart, all these different artists. They all had it was all Hank Ketchum. They all had different styles to their work.
Yeah, and to be honest, there is no like Walt Kelly to Schultz. I mean, come on. Walt Kelly, Schultz is an average cartoonist at best. It's the writing, it's the characters,
and I think he knew that too. I think
to be honest, he's barely okay. Walt Kelly's a master.
Oh, yeah, by comparison, yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of the early Schultz cartoons, they were depressing as hell. I mean,
that's where the power is, though.
I know, and I think there was a definite message where he's saying, people are saying, "Wow, these kids are mean." It's like, yeah, well, kids are mean, and this is what's. He might have been actually the first one, to sort of point out bullying because people, because you had that whole generation of people saying, suck it up, Not
only that, it's like like have your lead star be a freaking loser. And that's amazing.
Which Charlie Brown didn't start out that way. He started out as kind of a little Weisenheimer rapscallion, but something happened along the way, and I don't know if it was sort of Schultz's own demeanor, where Charlie Brown just became more and more of this kind of sad sack, depressive character.
Yeah.
I mean, even with the latest,
not just a sad sack, a loser.
Yeah.
He's a loser.
And you just feel awful for him, and in some ways you end up kind of empathizing with him.
But he still has but Schultz is kind of brilliant in his characterization. He's a loser, but he has the coolest pet in town.
Oh yeah,
by far. So it's like he's not a complete zero in just a dark world. He has the coolest dog that's anyone's ever had.
And he would.
So it's like the life's not so bad.
And also, he would give moments where Charlie Brown would get a little bit of his own back. I mean, there was this one Sunday strip where, the one character, Violet, was like needling Charlie Brown, how her dad is better at this, her dad is better at that, this, that. And Charlie Brown just, finally says, "Oh, wait a minute, just stop right there. I want to take you somewhere." And he takes her to his dad's barbershop, and he goes, my dad works here every day, I think like Monday through Friday, whatever it was in the 1950s. And, and he deals with some really crabby customers. But he says, but whenever I go in there and, I happen to stop in, he just stops and smiles at me. And you know why? My dad likes me. And, he just kind of just cut her off cold when she ends up walking away, sort of shamefaced, saying, "Oh, happy Father's Day, Charlie Brown." He's like, "I'll give my best to your dad as well." And it's with him saying that, him just, Charlie Brown is not a bad person and not out to hurt anybody. And actually, if there was anybody, he wasn't alone in the strip. He was actually, his best friend in the strip is Linus, who is, is also the brother of the strip's meanest character, Lucy. So imagine what he has to live with.
Yeah. And Linus is, it's just kind of like just such a know-it-all, man.
Yeah.
I mean, just a complete know-it-all. But Charlie's desperate for friends.
Exactly.
So he's gonna. I mean, Linus isn't that bad, but he is definitely a know-it-all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's like I mean that's. I guess it's like, as far as like longevity and power of a strip. I mean, I guess you'd have to probably give it to Peanuts.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're still, people are still. I mean,
it's still being reprinted.
And they just made it, and like a few years ago, they just made a movie, an animated movie with the Peanuts for the first time in a while. And the good thing about it was sort of co-produced with his children. So, I mean, they were able to keep the production from, straying too far from it, because I'm watching the trailers for it. It's like, I'm just thinking to myself, if this is just a whole thing of, because some of the past Peanuts specials, it's like, if this is just going to be like bashing Charlie Brown the whole time and saying what a loser he is, I'm out. I've seen that before, but it didn't. It actually kind of ended with him on top a little bit.
Yeah.
It didn't end with him, just being mercilessly crushed by the neighborhood kids.
Yeah. I mean, I do kind of get joy out of his sorrow, though, a little bit.
Maybe that was a little bit of Schultz's too.
Yeah.
Just sort of getting that, finding humor and sorrow. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I mean, the other thing actually was great about Walt Kelly, getting back to him, was he was actually the first person to really make people aware of environmental issues too.
Yeah.
I mean, he had the great Earth Day strip from, I think, maybe late 60s, early 70s, where him and his friend Porcupine.
When did he stop?
He died in, I think, 71. So
oh wow,
maybe a couple. It was like maybe a couple of years before he passed. He did this great strip with Pogo and his friend Porcupine, just walking through the swamp and saying, and Porky's saying, Pogo saying, them just saying, how beautiful it is walking through the forest primeval, and Pogo saying it's a little rough on the feet, and Porcupine says, yeah, it can be a little hard to walk through, and you're kind of looking off into the distance, and there's like all this garbage and junk and stuff that's kind of polluting the swamp. And Pogo's words, and this was like his famous line where he goes, "Yes, son, we has met the enemy, and he is us."
Yeah.
And that was probably one of the great Pogo lines that people might remember nowadays, but it stuck around for a long, long time. And there was another great difference between characters that Kelly did that was very kind of like maybe Charlie Brown and Linus, where you had Pogo, who was just like kind of everybody's friend and just kind of a good-natured character, and you had Porcupine, who was kind of a little bit of a grouch, but he actually had a heart of gold.
Yeah.
But he just I think he was one of these people like many of us, where they don't want people to get too close to you, get to know you too much. And there was always these great strips that Walt Kelly would do, like around Christmas, where Porky would wake up Pogo at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and give him this like a flower he kept from last July as a gift, and of course Pogo would be touched by it. It's like, oh shucks, Porky's like, well, don't get too mushy about it, Pogo. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I think the best ending probably has. The best last strip is probably, like Calvin and Hobbes did an amazing exit.
Bloom County's was also actually it was actually a very funny ending, because it's like at that time, speaking of a very Walt Kelly sort of way, Burke Breathed was taking like these really pointed pot shots at Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And this is before, people always knew Trump was a jackass, but I mean, this was like, even back then, you kind of knew this guy was a loudmouth. But in his strips, because I think Trump made some caustic remark that he didn't think Breathed was very, very talented or whatever. It's like, what do you know, asshole? But so apparently, Burke Breathed did this whole series of strips where Trump is accidentally hit by the anchor of his own yacht, and they have to transplant his brains into the body of Bill the Cat. And so you have Trump as Bill the Cat, who finally in the last strip, you find out that they've been canceled and the strip's been bought, and Donald Trump's the one who bought the strip.
So in comparison, I was making that point before, like the only way that we know about Krazy Kat is because Hearst forced them to publish it, basically.
I could see that. I could, it's
and also it's like, like Ben Ketcher. You should look him up. He did Julius Knipple, real estate photographer. Okay. He did the cardboard valets. He won the Genius Grant.
Oh, really?
Genius Award for like $500,000.
Oh, good.
And that's how. And I think some of the money he put on an opera in New York City. I wish I'd seen it. You should look him up. He's like,
I will.
My favorite modern cartoonist, and he started out with strips and weeklies and stuff.
Right.
So I and that's another sad thing. It's like, the dailies are still kind of holding on, the comics are getting smaller and smaller.
Right.
And, especially like the 20s newspapers, they have these fold out
Oh my God. Yeah.
cartoons and everything. But now,
They were full page.
yeah,
The
full
Sunday
page.
comics were full page
Yeah,
back in the
huge.
day.
And,
Not in our day, mind you. The only one that was
Yeah.
full page was Calvin and Hobbes. But I mean, back in like the 40s to the 60s, you'd open up the comic page and you'd have a whole page dedicated to, like, say, Walt Kelly's Pogo or Flash Gordon or Terry and the Pirates. Or
but he, like, I don't know how, like, someone like him would even. So all the weeklies are kind of dying.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Even more so because it's like their audience, like, 20s and 30-year-olds or something, or younger. Like, they're on their phones.
Well, I think in our day, the comic page was still like maybe a full page to 2 pages long. I mean, on the weekly pages. And even then they were like, they would just, you'd have a bunch of like 3 to 4 panel, 1 to 4 panel strips that are like fit onto, like a 1 page. And they were still, and then, most of the comics like Ziggy would be easy to read because there's not much to it. So
and the cartoons here are still 2 pages.
Oh, really? Okay.
But they're pretty small.
The last time I saw it, it seemed like they'd whittled it down around here to about a page and a half, or maybe less.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a newsie, so I read the paper every day. So, and I read, like, other newspapers too.
Well, I think the closest I ever got to doing like a weekly strip was in college, and that was probably the most fun I ever had doing it because I was given freedom.
Yeah. I think if we can end on the future, unfortunately, I mean, I think it's like, I think as a cartoonist, you'd have to be tied online somehow.
Oh yeah, I think
it would be cool if it was like tagged in some sort of collection with other things. I just love the idea of these cartoons being part of something else.
I know.
I like them to be married to some articles or something of journalistic interest. I do think that goes really well. Like how, like, I love the whiplash of you reading about like this expose and all these priests who molested these children, and then 5 pages later you're reading about these like creatures that live in a swamp or under the water, are doing like zany things. Like that juxtaposition, I do really miss that kind of idea and that wedding of things together.
Well, it's funny, even back in the day, I mean, people complained about Walt Kelly's strips being too political, especially, down in the southern states. They definitely got on, it's just like, they didn't want to hear this liberal garbage. And so Kelly was a very clever person, and he had a way of like making his feelings known, but in a very sly sort of way. So, because I mean, he had done, I think what really kind of got him in trouble is he started like taking very pointed shots at like the John Birch Society and the Ku Klux Klan, who, down south, that was still, I mean, probably still, there were still assholes down there today. But with Kelly, I mean, when, newspapers down there were threatening to pull his strip, he did something called the Cute and Fluffy Bunny strips. So it's like he would do is like he would send in 2 different versions of comic strips, one with like his political one with a political message that he had written for the week, and the other with like just these bunnies doing stuff.
Brilliant.
Just doing like cute, mindless stuff. So it's like these southern papers who didn't want to be preached to just had nothing but fluff. So
nice. I mean, you're it's, I mean, I guess in the future, it's for a young cartoonist or older one, I guess it's really like building up an online presence of some sort and having a place to promote, to have a place where your readers connect with it. But then I guess eventually, I don't know. Well, I don't know. Have you been on Substack? Are there cartoonists on Substack?
I'm not sure. I've never been on that.
So maybe there's some cartoonists on Substack. Here, I'm gonna quick look this up.
All right, but I think
edit this out.
Okay, I think the biggest thing also is people can, suppose for young artists, I definitely recommend checking out a lot of these artists we mentioned. I mean, definitely check out Walt Kelly, George Herman, George Herman's Krazy Kat, Segar's Popeye, and just, learn, I definitely learn from the past and just learn from these masters and just be inspired by, what they can do and seeing that, you can do so much more with your strips than just, the simple gag strips. And even if you're doing a gag a day, you can do it in sort of an interesting
and also there's this
way.
You could also I think just also if you're reading these old strips, it's great as you're into history.
Yep.
There's a lot of like these way people said things, the things of the time. It could be very interesting if you're interested in history and the cleverness of the dialogue and the characterization, the different characters. They don't all speak the same way. It's like fully realized worlds.
Exactly.
That are interesting to inhabit. And I just looked up Substack. It looks like there are cartoonists on there. I have to look.
Oh, okay.
One of the, I don't know. But I guess it's like you're not going to get. I mean, the newspapers are shrinking. Or falling away. As a cartoonist, you're just going to have to really
find
exclusively start online.
Yep. And I think that's a lot of most of the comics that you read in the newspaper, you read on sites like Comics Go or whatever they're called now. So it's like they haven't gone away, but it's not the same as getting those quick fixes, or are you getting quick fixes in a different way? I'm sort of just thinking like an old timer who says, I like the old days sort of thing. Yeah. And I'm not saying the old I'm saying I actually like the marriage of all these different kinds of entertainment and information and journalism all wrapped up in this like sandwich for you. Yeah.
There is something magical about that.
Yeah.
I think it's cool if there's websites or collections. I guess a Substack, you can get into all different people's stuff.
Right.
So, okay, I guess I'm waxing poetic for a form that's not really, and not really a reality in our world. But,
it's understandable and easy to do because I grew up in that generation where we still loved the comic page and read from the newspapers. I mean, it may seem very archaic to a lot of, like younger listeners, all three of them. But
I'm boosting the audience numbers. They love my last appearance. I think I got emails. One of them listened to it. He told 2 friends. That's 3 people who love us together.
Oh, that's fantastic.
The other crew, your other crew, very popular, funnier than I am, but we've got an older connection.
Yeah. We're the old generation.
You live with me. You used to call me Old Man Murphy.
Yes.
And now I am old.
Yeah. Yeah, we all sooner or later you get old, or as some people say, it's better to be seen than viewed.
But all right, well, so I would advise everyone, but if you can't afford to buy a book, go to your local library, look these books up, get it on interlibrary loan. You can definitely find Krazy Kat and Popeye.
Oh, honestly, that's how I got learned more about Pogo in my teen years, was the local library. I just, I picked up those books, I absorbed them. I mean,
and there's freaky naughty stuff. Speaking of Popeye, so like to end this on, like he going over to Olive Oil's house and he's like, "Hey, your dad's away. You know what that means? Let's have sex." No, that's sex. We're making love.
Oh, wooing. It's like we're making whoopee or something like that. What they would say?
They said make love. And
I think make love was different in those days. It might have been necking.
Okay, it could have been, but like still, like the father's away. And shenanigans. And then like the father
means.
Yeah, the father walks in the room. He's like, "Hey, I thought you weren't going to be here." He's like, "Well, I am now, so I don't want any kissing going on."
Well, blow me down.
Yeah. So Popeye asked the dad, "I was like, what am I supposed to do? I came over here for something." And like the father was like, "Well, rub her nose like an Eskimo."
I think I read that one.
Yeah. So they rubbed their nose for, I guess, like 3 hours, and their nose was like all raw. And I was like, the father was like, "Oh my God, these young people are out of, like they're horny, out of control kids."
Well, blow me down.
Yeah, I love his like, well, blow me down, because it could be used in so many different ways. Like blow me down, like it could be like you scream like blow me down, and also it's like when he goes over to squirt olive oil in the beginning, they weren't steady.
Oh no. And sometimes they, it's like she'd be like, I want nothing to do with you. It's like come out of hell with you, you dizzy dame. I'm out of here. I'm going back to the sea.
Well, he went to her house and she's got like 3 guys like hanging out in her parlor.
I think I read one of them where it was like she was with one guy trying to make Popeye jealous, and they're laughing about it, and I think he ends up punching the guy through the wall or something. Yeah. And then you see she's surprised and he's looking through the wall like, well, blow me down.
Maybe because they underestimate him, because it's like they're like just unwilling. They're just not afraid of like massive forearm strength.
Yeah.
Because they're used to like a big bicep punching you, but maybe like no one's like, it's like, I think I'm gonna have to be a Popeye for Halloween. Oh yeah. Yeah. I've got a captain's hat already.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking of like the way to do it is like, maybe get like flesh colored stockings to like stuff up my arms, That
would work. Yeah. Little
anchors on them. Yep. Yeah. I think I'm actually kind of look Popeye-ish.
Well, Popeye was one of those characters that translated well to film, especially the early Fleischer cartoons.
Yeah.
Because they tried to do that with Krazy Kat in the 1960s, and they just watered it down and got the humor all wrong, and
well. So in one of the books I was reading, Krazy Kat, he had his own ragtime musical.
Really?
Was produced in New York. Yeah, like probably like on the vaudeville stage, like some theaters.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Not like like a made show, but like a real show, and he drew original artwork for it.
That's awesome.
And like it was like a big show. It was like, I think, pretty popular. I mean, he's one of these cartoonists that was a huge kind of hit in the 20s, and it's like, like people just like, the depression hit really hard. People were like, I don't care about this weirdness anymore. I don't want to read this stuff anymore.
The world is weird enough,
Yeah, the world's just gone insane. I can't read this.
Yeah.
And then Hearst was like, no, you don't understand. He was insane. He was telling you about the insanity yet to come.
Exactly.
he knew the depression was on its way, Well,
I think we touched all the bases.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
So, I hope I gave you what you want.
Oh, you definitely did. On behalf of Murphy, thank you for listening to the Mental Suppository. Until next time, this is Brett Hurholtz saying,
Yes, Mingo, so Pogo, go, Killa, ha ha, go. Patsy, go to Frisco, go to Fargo. Oh, keep playing, a possum on a pogo. Stick around and see the show. Go overland alive, a band of jive will blow, go pogo. I go, you go, who go, to go, Polly-Voo, go. From Caravan Diego, oh, Waco and Oswego. Tweedledee, he go, she go, we go, me go, pogo. A Tascadero, wheelbarrow, someplace in Mexico. Delaware, Ohio, and you don't need the text to go. Wheeling, West Virginia, with everything that's in ya. Down the line, you'll see the shine from Oregon to Caroline. Inny, meeny, miny, crook, mogo, pogo. Tisha, mingo, sing those lingo, whistling, go. Shamokin to Hoboken, Shenango to Chicago. It's Galliago, Google, go, and go, go, pogo. Tascadero, wheelbarrow, someplace in Mexico. Delaware, Ohio, you don't need the text to go. Wheeling, West Virginia, with everything that's in ya. Down the line, you'll see the shine from Oregon to Carolina.
The Mental Suppository has been produced by Brett Hurholtz and Jamie Billings and distributed by M. The Media Project. Theme music generously donated by Mr. B, the Gentleman Rhymer. Visit his webpage at gentlemanrhymer.com. We would love to hear from our fans. Email us at mentalsuppository@gmail.com.
The keen and the quing were quarreling at quoits in the meadow behind of the mill. Though mainly the meadow was middled with mow and heretical hitherto hill. The prince and the princess were plating the plates and prating quite primly the pill. And that's why the Duchess stuck ducks on the dew. for no one was over to see.
Now violin only with pizzicato, blinky, blinky, palunkety, blank, 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 palunky, palunky, blink, 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 arco, zoom, zoomity, zoom, squeakety, squeaky, squeak, squeaky, squeak, con sordino, squeaky, squeak. Now senza sordino, squeak, 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 squeak. Now pizzicato, plunk, plunk, plunk.